Uncle gave me $500 during college and called it family helping family. Now he's demanding $20,000 and says my apartment is his return on investment. Part 1. The lunch that changed everything. I still remember the exact moment my uncle's face changed. We were sitting in a booth at Denny's, his choice, which should have been my first clue that something was off. My uncle had always been a steakhouse guy, the kind who insisted on picking up the check and making sure everyone noticed. But there we were, sharing a table sticky with syrup residue, and I watched his expression shift from casual to calculated as he leaned forward and said the words that would fracture our family. "That apartment of yours," he said, stirring his coffee slowly. "That's really something. A 27-year-old with property. Your grandmother would be proud." I smiled, not yet understanding where this was going. "Thanks. It's small, but it's mine. Took a lot of saving." "Saving?" He nodded, but his eyes had that gleam I'd later learn to recognize as hunger dressed up as nostalgia. "And help. Don't forget the help." Let me back up and tell you who I was before that lunch, before the demands and the family meetings and the relatives choosing sides like we were divorce lawyers dividing assets. I grew up in what I thought was a normal, loving, extended family. The kind where everyone showed up for holidays, where aunts pinched cheeks and uncles slipped you $20 for your birthday, where family helps family wasn't a transaction but a creed. My parents did their best, but money was always tight, not poverty tight, but careful tight. The kind of tight where you check the account before grocery shopping and feel the math in your stomach. When I got into a decent state university at 18, it was both triumph and terror. My parents could cover tuition with loans and their savings, but everything else, books, supplies, the occasional emergency, existed in a gray zone of anxiety. That's when the extended family stepped in, and at the time, I thought it was love made tangible. My uncle, my mother's older brother, gave me $200 freshman year. "For textbooks," he said, pressing the check into my hand at a family barbecue. Family helps family. No ceremony, no strings mentioned, just a pat on the shoulder and a return to his beer and the football game on TV. My aunt, his wife, sent me $100 that winter with a card that said, "Stay warm and study hard. You're our future." I bought a decent coat and wore it until the zipper broke 3 years later. My grandmother, who passed during my junior year, pressed $150 into my palm during one of my visits home. "For that laptop," she said. She'd heard I needed repairs. "Education matters more than anything. You'll do great things." I cried in the car afterward, not because of the money but because of what it represented, belief, pure and uncomplicated. Over 4 years, the gifts accumulated. 500 from my uncle, spread across random moments of need. 300 from my aunt. 200 scattered among other relatives. Birthday checks that came with no expectation beyond, buy yourself something nice. Maybe $3,000 total, and I was grateful for every penny. I said thank you every time, wrote cards, made phone calls. I meant every word. Not once, not a single time, did anyone call it a loan. No one mentioned repayment. No one presented terms or interest rates or contracts. The money arrived wrapped in words like gift and help and family. I received it as such. I assumed that's what it was. College was hard in ways that money couldn't fully solve. I worked part-time at the campus bookstore, studied until my eyes burned, accumulated student loans that would follow me into my 30s. I graduated with a degree in business management and a GPA that opened exactly enough doors. I landed an entry-level job, worked 60-hour weeks, got promoted, worked more. By 25, I developed the aggressive saving habits of someone who remembers what it felt like to check his account balance with dread. At 27, I bought an apartment. $138,000 for a modest place on the edge of a neighborhood that was slowly becoming fashionable. The down payment came from my salary, my savings, my years of discipline. The mortgage was mine to carry. The $3,000 from relatives during college helped me survive my education, but it didn't fund my future. Years of work did that. I was proud. For the first time in my life, I owned something real, something that couldn't be taken away by a landlord's whim or a lease ending. I invited family over for a housewarming, and they came with congratulations and wine and casserole dishes. My uncle walked through the rooms, nodding slowly, saying, "Nice. Very nice." I thought he was happy for me. I didn't know, at that housewarming, what my uncle had become. He'd always been the family success story, or at least the one who presented himself that way. Nice car, confident manner, the kind of man who dominated Thanksgiving conversations with stories of deals closed and investments made. We believed him because he looked the part and sounded certain. But the truth, which I'd learn in fragments over the following months, was darker. Bad investments that went worse. A divorce that drained accounts and generated lawyer bills that multiplied like debt rabbits. Credit cards maxed, equity lines exhausted, retirement accounts raided early with penalties that compounded his problems. He wasn't broke, not yet, but he was scared. 57 years old and watching his future crumble, calculating years until retirement and realizing the numbers didn't work. That kind of fear makes people do things they wouldn't otherwise do. It makes them look at family and see assets instead of people. When he invited me to lunch, just to catch up, I said yes without suspicion. I liked my uncle, or the version of him I'd known. He'd been generous during my college years. He told good stories. He remembered my birthday. We ordered. I got an omelet, he got the grand slam, and the mundane normality of it made what came next feel even more surreal. "So," he said, after the small talk wound down, "the apartment. How's that working out?" I told him. The commute was manageable, the neighbors quiet, the feeling of ownership still novel and wonderful. I'd hung pictures on the walls without asking permission. I'd painted the bedroom a shade of blue that was probably a mistake but was my mistake. He listened, nodding, and then the pivot came, smooth as a knife sliding between ribs. "You know, I was thinking the other day about how far you've come. Remember when you were that scared freshman who didn't know how he'd afford textbooks? And look at you now, property owner, career guy, the whole package." "I was lucky," I said. "And I had help. I've always been grateful for that." "Help." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That's one word for it. I was thinking of another word. Investment." I felt the ground shift beneath me, even though we were sitting in a vinyl booth bolted to a linoleum floor. "Investment," I repeated. "Sure." He sipped his coffee, playing casual, but his hand had a slight tremor I'd never noticed before. "When I gave you that money during college, $500 over 4 years, not nothing, I wasn't just helping. I was investing in your future. Betting on you. And look how that bet paid off. Uncle, I appreciate." He held up a hand. "Let me finish. We all invested. Me, your aunt, your grandmother, rest her soul, others. We saw potential and we put money behind it. That's what family does. We believe in each other. We stake our resources on each other's success." I chose my words carefully. "And I'm grateful. I've told everyone thank you more times than I can count. That help meant everything to me. Gratitude." He waved his hand like he was dispersing smoke. "That's nice. Words are nice. But gratitude doesn't pay bills." There it was. The purpose of the lunch, laid bare like bone beneath flesh. "What are you saying, exactly?" He leaned forward, and I saw something in his face I'd never seen before, desperation wearing a mask of righteousness. "I'm saying it's time to show that gratitude properly. I gave you money when you needed it. $500 that I could have used myself. Now I need help. That's how family works, reciprocal investment. The returns are supposed to flow both ways." My omelet was cooling on my plate. I'd lost my appetite. "What kind of help are we talking about?" And then he said it. "I need about $20,000. He gave me $500 over 4 years of college. Now he wanted $20,000, 40 times what he gave. He called it return on investment. I called it what it was, rewriting history to extract money he never lent. Update 1. The theory of manufactured debt. I didn't respond immediately. Couldn't. My brain was doing math it didn't want to do. $500 becoming $20,000. 400% returns. Better than any hedge fund, achieved through the alchemy of family obligation and selective memory. $20,000, I said finally. To consolidate some debts. Get back on my feet. He said it like it was reasonable, like asking your nephew for 40 times your original contribution was a normal family request. "You've got options. That apartment, you could take a home equity loan. Hell, you could sell it, downsize, help the people who helped you. You want me to sell my apartment? I want you to remember where you came from." His voice hardened. "That $500 I gave you back then, adjusted for inflation, plus what it enabled you to become, it's worth way more than $20,000 now. You owe the family. You owe me." I sat with that for a moment, feeling the words settle into my chest like stones. "Let me understand your math," I said slowly. "You gave me $500 across 4 years. Different relatives gave me maybe $3,000 total. And now you believe that entitles you, or them, to my apartment equity. I believe that family invests in family, and when investments pay off, returns are shared." He crossed his arms. It's not complicated. Except it is. I pushed my plate aside. By your logic, my high school teachers are stakeholders. The cafeteria workers who made sure I ate are stakeholders. My parents should be majority shareholders. The guy who fixed my bike when I was 12, does he own a percentage of my career? Where does it end? Don't play games with me. His face flushed. I'm not some stranger. I'm your uncle. Your blood. I helped you when you had nothing, when you were a scared kid who didn't know how he'd survive. I could have spent that money on myself, but I chose to invest in your future. You chose to give your nephew money for textbooks. You called it a gift. You said, family helps family. Not family loans family with interest compounded over a decade. Semantics. No. I shook my head. Not semantics. Reality. There's a difference between a gift and an investment, and you don't get to change which one it was 9 years later because you need money. When he gave the money, he said, family helps family. No mention of repayment. No terms. No loan documents. 9 years later, it was suddenly an investment that entitled him to my apartment equity. Gifts don't work that way. Or they shouldn't. The lunch ended poorly. He paid, maybe the last time he'd pick up a check with me, and we walked to our cars in silence thick enough to touch. I sat in my driver's seat for a long time afterward, hands on the wheel, staring at nothing, trying to process what had just happened. $20,000. Because he gave me $500 once upon a time and now decided that made him a shareholder in my life. I called my mom that night. I need to ask you something, I said, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course. I could hear the concern in her voice. When Uncle gave me money during college, $500 over 4 years, was that a gift or a loan? The pause was brief but telling. Did he say something to you? Just answer the question. Please. It was a gift. Her voice went hard, the way it did when she was angry on someone else's behalf. Nobody expected you to repay it. That's ridiculous. He called it a gift, everyone treated it as a gift, it was given as a gift. What did he say to you? I told her. About the lunch, the demands, the math that turned 500 into 20,000 through the magic of manufactured obligation. I told her about the apartment, how he wanted me to sell it or take out a loan against it to fund his recovery from his own bad decisions. When I finished, there was silence on the line. That son of a... She caught herself. That's not what that money was. He knows it's not what it was. He's rewriting history because he needs money and he sees you as a source. That's what I thought. But I needed to hear it from someone else. You'll hear it from everyone who gave you anything during those years. Your aunt, your cousins. Nobody expected repayment. We helped you because you're family, not because we wanted stock options in your future. I thanked her and hung up, feeling slightly steadier. My memory wasn't faulty. The gifts were gifts. My uncle was the one distorting reality, bending the past to fit his present needs. But I knew this wasn't over. Update 2. The family campaign. Within a week, the calls started. My aunt, my uncle's wife, reached out first, her voice careful and measured in a way that told me she'd been coached. Your uncle mentioned your conversation, she said. He's upset. He feels like you've forgotten what family did for you during those hard years. I haven't forgotten. I've thanked everyone multiple times. Thanking is one thing. I could almost hear her reading from a script. But when family helps you succeed, and then someone in that family needs help themselves, isn't it right to give back? Of course. Which is why I offered him $1,000. Silence. He didn't mention that part. I imagine he didn't. After her came others. A cousin who'd given me $50 for a birthday during sophomore year called to check in, and somehow steered the conversation toward my obligation to the family network. Another relative, one I barely remembered giving me anything, emailed asking if I'd considered how much family support mattered during your formative years. The narrative was spreading, and my uncle was its author. The story went like this: ungrateful nephew, lifted up by generous family, now refuses to help the very people who made him. The $3,000 in gifts became a mythical sum that had apparently funded my entire education and down payment. My modest apartment transformed in the telling into a symbol of wealth hoarded selfishly while elders struggled. It was coordinated. It was effective. And it was built on a foundation of revisionist history. His theory: without their $3,000, I wouldn't have finished college. Without college, no career. Without career, no apartment. Therefore, they own part of my apartment. By that logic, my kindergarten teacher is a stakeholder in my mortgage. The math only works if you ignore all the math. I did my research. Talked to my parents, to cousins who'd grown up alongside me, to anyone who had a clear memory of those college years. What I found wasn't surprising but was clarifying. My uncle had a pattern. A cousin who became a doctor had faced something similar. Uncle claiming his modest graduation gift entitled him to free medical advice and, when he developed high blood pressure, free treatment and prescriptions redirected through her practice. She'd refused and become ungrateful in his telling. Another relative had started a small business. Uncle had loaned her $500 during the startup phase, and 5 years later when the business found modest success, he demanded a return that dwarfed his contribution. She paid because she couldn't handle the family pressure. She still resented it. My uncle, I realized, was a collector of obligations. Every gift was actually a deposit in a ledger only he maintained, waiting for the right moment to demand interest. Family wasn't a network of love and support, it was a portfolio of future debts. 2 weeks after the Denny's lunch, I asked to meet him again. We sat in the same booth, maybe even the same sticky table. I'd rehearsed what I wanted to say. "I've thought about our conversation," I started. "And I've talked to Mom, to Aunt, to some cousins. I've tried to understand your perspective." He looked cautiously hopeful. And I appreciate the $500 you gave me during college. I've appreciated it since the moment you handed me that first $200. But that was a gift, you said so yourself at the time. Family helps family. Not family loans family at interest rates that would make credit card companies blush. That's not. Please. Let me finish. I kept my voice steady, reasonable, even though my heart was pounding. You gave me a gift. I received it as a gift. I've thanked you for it repeatedly. Now you're trying to convert that gift into an investment retroactively because you need money. That's not how gifts work. That's not how family should work. His jaw tightened. So what are you saying? You won't help me at all. I'm saying I'll help you because you're family and you're struggling, not because I believe I owe you anything beyond gratitude. I'll give you $1,000. $1,000. He said it like I'd offered him pocket change. That's twice what you gave me across 4 years. It's what I can afford without jeopardizing my own financial security. And I'm giving it without expecting anything in return, the way gifts are supposed to work. That's an insult. He stood up so fast the table shook. I could have used that $500 myself back then. I chose to invest in you. And now you're worth, what, over $100,000 in property alone. And you sit there offering me crumbs. I'm offering you help. Proportional help. What you're asking for isn't help, it's unlimited access to whatever I have because you once gave me something you've now decided was a loan. He grabbed his coat. Keep your $1,000. Keep your apartment. Keep your fancy career. But remember this moment when you're wondering why nobody in this family respects you anymore. You made your choice. I made a reasonable offer that you rejected because it wasn't enough. That's your choice. He left without looking back. I sat alone with 2 coffees cooling on the table, feeling like I just passed a test I didn't know I'd been studying for. I offered $1,000, twice what he gave. He called it an insult. Because he didn't want proportional help. He wanted unlimited access. The $500 was supposed to buy permanent obligation. When I refused, I became the villain. Update 3. The family fracture. What followed was what I should have expected but still somehow wasn't prepared for, the family split. My uncle made good on his threat. Within days, the narrative solidified and spread. I was ungrateful, selfish, abandoning family in their time of need. The $3,000 in total gifts became, in his telling, the foundation of my entire success. He told anyone who would listen that I'd refused to help, without mentioning that I'd offered $1,000 that he'd rejected as insufficient. Some relatives believed him. The ones who'd never been close to me, who didn't remember the exact circumstances of their own gifts, who heard he won't help his uncle, and filled in the blanks with their own assumptions about millennial selfishness and generational ingratitude. Others saw through it. My mother was furious on my behalf, calling her brother to demand he stop spreading lies. My father, quieter but no less angry, sent me an email, "You did the right thing. Don't let him make you doubt that." A cousin who'd faced her own version of uncle's collection efforts texted, "Welcome to the club." He tried it with me too. The family divided along lines I hadn't known existed. On one side, people who gave freely, birthday money, graduation checks, wedding gifts, with no expectation of return beyond continued relationship. On the other, people who gave with invisible contracts, who kept ledgers of favors and expected compound interest on every kind gesture. We'd always been both kinds, I realized. I just hadn't known it until the line was drawn and I had to choose which side I was on. He said, family always keeps score. Maybe his family does. Mine doesn't. Or didn't, until he proved some members were keeping ledgers I never knew about. Now I know who gives freely and who gives with invisible invoices. Family gatherings became minefields. Thanksgiving that year required careful coordination. My uncle at one house, me at another, and the division felt like a death in the family, except the person we lost was still alive and blaming me for the funeral. When we did occupy the same space, at larger events we couldn't both avoid, the cold civility was almost worse than open hostility. He'd nod in my direction. I'd nod back. We'd orbit each other like planets that had once shared a gravity but now spun in separate systems. I grieved the uncle I'd thought I had, the one who gave without strings, who patted my shoulder at barbecues and seemed genuinely glad to see me succeed. That person, I realized, had never existed. Or had existed only provisionally, his generosity contingent on future returns I was expected to deliver. Update 4. 2 years later. Time doesn't heal all wounds, but it does clarify which ones were worth the bleeding. 2 years after the Denny's conversation that changed everything, my uncle found his way to stability. Not through me. I'd maintained my boundary, and my $1,000 offer had been rejected as an insult not worth taking. He got a consolidation loan somewhere, downsized his lifestyle, adjusted his expectations. He wasn't thriving, but he wasn't drowning either. He never apologized. Never acknowledged that his demand was unreasonable, that rewriting history to transform gifts into investments was manipulation dressed up as family values. When we see each other now, at the occasional wedding, the unavoidable funeral, he's coldly civil. I match his temperature. We've achieved equilibrium of distance. The $500 that was supposed to represent family love destroyed our relationship when he tried to collect 40 times that amount. If he'd accepted my $1,000 offer, we'd still talk. But he wanted my apartment or nothing. Now he has nothing, from me at least. Some investments have negative returns. What I lost, an uncle or the illusion of one. A chunk of my extended family who believed his version of events. The comfortable assumption that everyone in my family gave with open hands and open hearts. What I gained, clarity, boundaries, the ability to recognize conditional generosity before it wraps its strings around you. Resolution, the note in the envelope. A month ago, my youngest cousin graduated high school. She's heading to state college in the fall, the same school I attended almost a decade ago. Same excitement, same terror, same math that doesn't quite add up. I went to her graduation party. My uncle was there. We did our orbit, our nod, our careful maintenance of separate spheres. But that wasn't why I came. I found my cousin by the dessert table, high on accomplishment and looking at the future like it was a present she couldn't wait to unwrap. I pressed an envelope into her hand. What's this? Open it later. When things are quiet. She did. I know because she called me that night, her voice thick with something between gratitude and confusion. Inside the envelope was $200 and a note. The note said, "This is a gift. No strings. No expectations. No future claims. Just congratulations from someone who remembers what it's like to be young and starting out. Spend it however you need. Never feel obligated to me. That's not what family means. You didn't have to do this," she said. "I wanted to. And I wanted to make sure you knew what it was and what it wasn't." What it wasn't? An investment. A loan. A future favor I'll call in when you have something I want. I heard my own voice tighten. Some people give that way. I don't want to be one of them. There was a pause, and I wondered how much she knew about what had happened between me and her uncle, my uncle too, when you traced the family tree far enough. "Thank you," she said finally, "for the money and for the other thing. The clear thing. Use it for textbooks. Or a coat. Or something frivolous that makes you happy. It's yours. It's always been yours. It's never going to be mine again." My uncle gave me $500 during college. 9 years later, he demanded $20,000, or access to my apartment equity. He called it return on investment. He'd rewritten history. Gifts became loans, help became holdings, family became shareholders in my success. I refused. Offered $1,000, twice what he gave. He rejected it as an insult. He wanted unlimited returns on limited input, and when he didn't get them, he told the family I'd betrayed the people who made me. Some relatives believed him. Others remembered giving me birthday money and didn't expect to own my car as a result. The family split along lines I hadn't known existed, Those who give freely versus those who give with invisible contracts. I keep the apartment. I lost the uncle, or lost the illusion that he was someone who gave without strings. The $500 that was supposed to be love turned out to be a down payment on future control. I learned something, though. Now when I help someone, I make it clear, gift or loan, terms explicit, no manufactured IOUs. What my uncle meant as manipulation became my education. Maybe that's the return on his investment he didn't expect. I'll never be like him. I'll never hold family hostage to manufactured debts. That's worth more than any apartment. Broken heart, bittersweet victory. I still think about him sometimes. The uncle he was at that barbecue when I was 18, pressing $200 into my hand and saying, "Family helps family." I believed him then. I want to believe he believed himself. But somewhere between that moment and the Denny's booth, the gift transformed in his mind into something else. Maybe it was always something else, and I was too young to see the strings attached. Maybe the desperation of his 50s corrupted memories that were once pure. I'll never know. What I know is this: I own my apartment. I earned it with years of work that no one else did for me. I'm grateful for the $3,000 that helped me survive college, and that gratitude doesn't include surrendering my future to people who've decided their small kindnesses entitle them to large returns. The envelope I gave my cousin contained $200. Maybe she'll use it for books. Maybe she'll spend it on something unnecessary but joyful. Whatever she chooses, I'll never show up at her door in 15 years demanding 40 times that amount because I once helped her. That's the lesson my uncle taught me, though he never meant to. Gifts should be gifts. Love should be love. And nobody should ever confuse helping a student with buying a share in their future. The investment he made in me? The real return was this: I learned exactly the kind of family member I refused to become. That's worth more than $20,000. It's worth more than any apartment. It's worth everything.